Hey there, Kings Mountain. Today we're talking about the Neritic and the open ocean zones. So today you're going to find out all kinds of different characteristics about those two particular zones. Miss Ludwig talked to you about the intertidal zone in the last note section. So we're moving outward from the continent. So she started with the intertidal zone. Now we're moving out past the intertidal zone into the Neritic zone and the open ocean zone. This is a picture of a hydrothermal vent. So this is in the deep ocean, and this is where zero sunlight is going to be at. And so photosynthesis can't happen, but what happens is these hydrothermal vents push out this black, really hot smoke. They're also called black smokers for that reason. And so what also lives here is bacteria, and those bacteria are going through chemosynthesis because there's no sunlight, so we're not talking photosynthesis. No, there's no sunlight. And then these giant tube worms are feeding off of that bacteria that is being created from that chemosynthesis. So this is just a really neat area, and we'll talk about it a little bit later in the video as well. So the first zone after the intertidal zone is the Neritic zone. There are lots of organisms that live in this zone, and we're talking about the area over top of the continental shelf. So before we hit that continental slope. And in your 4.2 notes, we talked about upwelling. Upwelling is going to occur in this area. So upwelling is going to bring nutrients and water up to the surface. So we have cold water at the bottom of the ocean, right? And this diagram is showing you that upwelling is going to kind of come upward, and it's going to bring nutrients. It's going to allow for plants and algae to grow because of the sunlight at the top. And then we have this continual kind of churning that's happening. And so it's going to take those nutrients back down to the bottom of the ocean and kind of keep churning that around. So this is necessary for all the consumers and things that live in this area because, right, all those nutrients are what all the organisms want to eat. So we're going to need, the fish are going to need all kinds of nutrients to survive. So that upwelling provides them with the nutrients, brings them to the top. Sunlight is going to help that algae and phytoplankton and things grow at the top. This is a picture of a kelp forest. So this is your first area that is specified for the Neritic zone. In your box, you're going to write that this is often seen in cold water, rocky floor. So, you know, this is something that you might see in the Pacific Northwest, Seattle, Oregon. I know Miss Ludwig mentioned her visit out to Seattle in the previous video. And I was there a few years ago visiting a cousin that lives in the Seattle area. And you can see the kelp at the top of or the surface of the ocean. So they are rooted in the ocean floor, but they are these giant stalks, and they're rising to the sunlight, right? Because they are photosynthetic. So they want to reach up to that sunlight. And so looking out into the ocean from the shore, you can see these kelp forests. You can see the tops of them. And so this is pretty cold water. It needs sunlight. Things like sea urchins are going to feed on the kelp, and then we know that cute little otters eat sea urchins. So that's the kind of environment we're talking about. The next environment is in warm water, so warm neritic waters. And this is a picture of some coral reef. Coral reef should be very colorful. Um, if it's not, it's probably damaged in some way. But a misconception is that coral is a plant, and it's not. It's actually colonies of little coral animals. And this is typically found in shallow, neritic, tropical waters. So something you might see in the Caribbean or Central America if you go scuba diving or snorkeling. You might see some amazing coral, and just really, really beautiful. Next up is the open ocean zone. So this is where the continental shelf drops off. So we're talking the continental slope and outward. And only a small part of this water receives a lot of sunlight. So the surface of the water here receives sunlight. So there's not as much nutrients in this water as the neritic zone, because it's a lot deeper, and we don't have a large portion of the water getting sunlight like the neritic zone. This is also referred as the oceanic zone. And then in the next couple of slides, I'm going to talk to you about the different zones within the open ocean zone. So the first one is called the surface zone, and in previous notes, we talked about this being called the photic zone as well. So photo meaning light, your stem, and so this is going to take in sunlight. It's going to be able to grow algae, phytoplankton. This is a picture of volvox. Red algae is possible. And then, we have nectin that are going to also consume those things. So you do have other organisms in this area consuming those smaller photosynthetic organisms. Further down, as you go into the open ocean zone, so deeper, is called the transition zone. So what are we transitioning from? We're transitioning from light to dark. So this goes from the surface zone down to the deep dark zone, which we'll talk about in a minute. So about an average of a kilometer below the surface, and as you go deeper into the ocean water, it's getting colder and darker. If you see the word thermocline, that is describing this zone as well. The deep zone is pretty neat. It's also sometimes called the benthic zone. You should be thinking benthos from your previous notes. This is the coldest and the darkest area of the ocean, and a lot of organisms produce their own light. And they have to be good hunters, because this is, there is zero light in this area. So you have bioluminescent algae. So this is how it glows blue, really pretty like that. This is the area where you're going to see hydrothermal vents. So again, no light here. Bacteria is being produced through chemosynthesis, and we have giant tube worms that are feeding off of that bacteria. Just some really cool and kind of neat looking organisms. You might remember the anglerfish from Finding Nemo. So remember, the anglerfish has this little light organ that is attached to their head, and so that anglerfish is going to use that to draw in its prey. And in both of these pictures of the anglerfish, you can really see their teeth. And so they're using that to hunt down their predator. And that's their main goal, is to lure them in and to eat them. So some pretty cool organisms that you might see some videos on a playlist about. So check those out. This is just another slide showing you some bioluminescence. So just some really cool creatures. If you go to Wilmington, you are probably going to see some bioluminescent jellyfish at the aquarium. So try to check those out. It's in an area where they have the room is pretty dark, and so that you can see that the jellyfish are bioluminescent. They're not lighting those up. That is something that's happening chemically in the organism's body to help them survive. This is a picture of a deep sea giant isopod that Miss Owens researched, and this is a decomposer, so just a pretty cool organism. So the next section talks about resources in the ocean, and we've talked a little bit about the living organisms there, but we have a lot of non-living resources in the ocean as well. So one main one is water. The problem with ocean water is that it's salty, and so we can't really drink that, right? It would just dehydrate us and cause issues. We need to drink fresh water as humans, and so as the years go on, there is more research being done about desalination, so taking the salt out of ocean water. Fuels are found in the ocean, so heat and pressure turn dead organisms' remains into oil and natural gas. So you may, at some point, see from shore an oil rig, and I've got a picture of one on the next couple slides that I'll show you in just a minute. And so they are drilling for oil in that area, and there are typically lots of deposits like on the continental shelf because the dead organisms have decayed and their remains are changing to oil and natural gas as years go on. Minerals are also found on that continental shelf. Solid substances obtained from the ground and water. So a lot of times minerals sometimes get mixed up with rocks, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in the geology unit. But diamonds, gold are minerals. So we have lots of substances like that that can be found in the ocean and used for everyday life. All right, so who protects the oceans? So do they belong to anyone? And there's, some pictures kind of cycling here. We've talked a little bit about pollution and how to, keep our waters clean, and so we want to do the same for the ocean. And there's now a lot of talk about ocean water and how to keep that clean in media lately. So the EPA is called the Environmental Protection Agency, and they regulate what goes into water through what's called the Clean Water Act, or the Federal Water Pollution Control Act. And what that does is it restores and maintains the chemical, physical, and biological integrity of the nation's waters, prevents point and non-point pollution sources, which we talked about in the freshwater unit, provides assistance to wastewater treatment plants, maintains wetlands. We talked about how important the wetlands are in the last unit. And so the EPA is going to join forces with a lot of different other organizations to help try to keep water clean. And so this is an act. So it's a piece of legislation that tells companies and factories what they can and cannot put into the waters, which is a really good thing. All right, this graph is on page 9, same page as your notes, so right below it, and you have some questions there. This is a picture of an oil rig. So this is what they're doing for the offshore drilling. So when you look at this bar graph and you see offshore drilling, that's what they're doing. So offshore drilling for oil and natural gas. We've heard of air pollution. Street runoff is going to be all that stuff from cars, oil, gas, things like that. Natural seeps, ship repair, so ships that are in the water, they need to be repaired sometimes. So you can see that, you know, the ships have oil, they need to use oil to run, and so we have some pollution coming from that as well, and then just oil spills in general. So you want to use that graph to answer the questions to the left of that graph in your packet. This is in your packet, page 11, and again, this is another picture of that hydrothermal vent that we've seen, and this is a food web at that hydrothermal vent. So down in the deep ocean, you're going to see all these life forms. So you're going to see shrimp and crabs and mussels and bacteria and giant tube worms. And so in this column right here, it says P, C, or D. You're going to identify whether these things are producers, consumers, or decomposers. So I'll give you a little hint. There is one producer. Sorry about that. Pull that back up. There is one producer in that table. There is one decomposer, and the rest are consumers. So remember, producers are going to make their own food. Decomposers are going to break down food or remains from other organisms, and then consumers are consuming other organisms or eating them. All right, so give that a shot, and your teacher will go over the answers with you.